Kingdoms of Amalur is a fantasy RPG set in the Faelands. It's got a bit of a twist on the RPG formula. In fact, you start the game dead. Your corpse is dumped on a pile of other failed attempts at necromancy, before you reawaken to find yourself wiped of any kind of predetermined fate.
Yes, in Amalur, every living creature has their fate etched in stone, but you, newly risen from the dead, have the unique ability to create your own. It's a clever way the story weaves itself into the player's role in choosing your class and character abilities that you'll be focusing on. You can choose from one of the 4 available races of human and elf, and thus, your adventure begins.
As you try to make sense of this mysterious well of souls that has apparently brought you back to life, and the sinister Tuatha who are encroaching on the Faelands, you attempt to fight your way out into the open and make immediate use of magical weapons and natural abilities you have at your disposal.
My first impressions of this game was that the art and design was a little bit cartoony. I mean, it was almost Blizzard-like with its bright colours and big oversized weapons. And I have to say that graphically, I wasn't that impressed.
See, I would have pegged you as really liking the look of this game, you know? It's got all those fantasy vistas that you quite like, and there's waterfalls and the big trees.
Yeah, I mean, I did do a few slow pans of the landscape here and there, but I do prefer the art to be a little bit more sophisticated than this. Parts of this world even felt a little kidsy with its magical fairy land and the fairy people with the flowers and the fairies and the cute little sprites and the hobgoblin enemies. Other areas later in the game do get a fair bit darker. I don't know, the world just lacked punch for me.
My problem was to actually appreciate the beauty, you had to stop and look around because the camera angle has got this downward focus, which I didn't mind for the action, but you don't really get to take in the sights. The game's executive designer was the lead designer on Oblivion and Morrowind, and you can see that DNA intertwined with it here. It reminded me a lot of Fable in certain areas, but it lacks all of the charm and personality of the Fable games. Still, I enjoyed the combat here much more than the Fable games, and had quite a good time running around with my warrior, stabbing everything I could see.
Well, on that, we should probably talk about the crazy class system.
Ah yes, the class system itself is actually pretty standard. You can put points into sorcery, might, or finesse, but each class uses a combination of magic and melee, and the customization options are practically endless.
I, of course, went straight rogue. I can't help it, it's what I love, it's what I know, and it's how I like to roleplay. My elf had a variety of nasty stealth attacks, ice traps, poison clouds, but she also had lightning bolts and could wield a mage's staff if she wanted to. I put a lot of points into Feyblade Mastery though, and I have to say, Feyblades were my favourite, so quick and deadly, although they do look a bit ridiculous strapped to your back when you're just running around.
I loved my scorpion spear to pull enemies closer. Get over here! Get over here! Get over here!
I really enjoyed having a good combo of magic and melee. Given that I put all of my points into finesse, it makes combat feel meaty and varied, so you don't tire of any battles since you have such a great array of options. But here's where it gets crazy. You can respec your entire character, including class, whenever you want. It costs a bit of coin, but it's easily doable. The question is, would you want to?
Absolutely. I always wonder how the other classes have it. This is a big game, possibly hundreds of hours of gameplay. Can't guarantee I'm going to replay the entire thing just so I can have a go at sorcery.
I disagree. I mean, for me, an RPG is a really complete experience. I mean, when I create a character, I'm really committed to her. You know, I build her up from the beginning, I hone her skills till she's a master at her craft. To suddenly snap my fingers and suddenly become a mage, I just can't do that. It feels like all this hard work for nothing.
At least they backed up that decision with story.
Yeah, but even that I found pretty lacking. I mean, every time I had to talk to that fate guy, I just found myself skipping through it.
I've spent the last 20 years knowing what fate had in store for me.
Shut up.
I hated every single word in this game, and the voice acting didn't really match the characters. Those gnomes sounded so weird, but just none of the dialogue gripped me or had me invested in the character, so skip.
Skip it.
Skip it.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to get straight back to the action, which for the most part is pretty damn good. It's full of good old-fashioned adventure cliches like, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
Enemies vary throughout Amalur, and in MMO-like fashion are often grouped with a handful of easier enemies and one heavy hitter. Often they rely on stringing together combos that constantly knock you back and will wipe you out quickly if you don't manage to time a string of hits in first.
But you also have a fate meter, which allows you to enter reckoning mode, which will help you in a bind by allowing you to obliterate everything in sight and perform a devastating takedown. I'd say it isn't an I win button though, because it takes practically forever to regenerate, so you really need to save it for those moments when you absolutely need it most. You can fast travel between points you've already been to, but it's important to save often. Some deaths took me back to a save point in the game 15 minutes ago prior to an entire dungeon I just completed.
Yeah, the map was okay. I think it could have been better though, but those quest checkpoint markers were very confusing.
Yeah, at one point I was cursed and looking for a healer, and the map wouldn't tell me which town had one in it unless I was actually in that town at the time. You kind of just need to rely on your memory or travel from town to town until you find one with a specific trade that you need. While running about the place, you'll also gather herbs which you can combine at alchemy tables to create your own potions. This is initially done by pure experimentation, which I really loved. You discover the recipe for a fire resistance potion by just picking 2 herbs at random and mixing them together.
It's the same with sagecraft. You find crystal shards around the place in treasure chests, and you can use those to make gems which you slot into your armor. There were so many loot texts, I just kept finding armor everywhere, which is good because you'd use those as salvage for the blacksmithing, and I love blacksmithing. I could blacksmith for days.
Really? I mean, I got some great weapons, that's for sure. Like I said, Faeblades were insanely awesome to use, but I found things severely lacking on the armor side. I was just running around in the same crummy leathers for hours because, I'd modded them with gems and couldn't find anything better.
Yeah, I think you can play this game a few different ways. I think it's a real strength of the game actually, because I was swapping my gear out all the time because I had lots of points in Detect Hidden, so I was just finding loots under rocks and trees and everywhere.
So much of Amalur feels empty to me. It just doesn't feel inhabited. Even the hub areas are sparse. And it annoyed me to no end that when running from place to place, you couldn't fall or jump off ledges unless there is a specific allocated jump point. This means you have to mostly stick to the path, which kind of defeats the purpose of true adventuring. Anyway, what are you giving it, Barger?
Well, look, it is pretty light on some areas, especially in the story side of things, but the combat is what kept me in it. I found it thrilling, so I'm giving this 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
This is my genre. Truth be told, I love any fantasy RPG because that's where my heart is. But the story, the art, the whole world, and I guess some of the mechanics, they just didn't hit the chord with me as well as other games in this genre really have. So I'm gonna give it 7.
Plus, it's a stupid name. Kingdoms of Amalur.
Kingdoms of
Amalur. We spoke to producer Sean Bean and lead designer Ian Fraser about the game, and you can see that full interview on the website.